Okay, if you guys can put away your cell phones and your laptops, you're going to start. As soon as you're ready. So this is Ashley Whitlatch. She's the head of the Global Education Programs and Partnership at Prezi. She does a lot of cool things and travels around the world for education, like for Prezi. Yeah, we can welcome her to class.
Inviting me to come visit you guys. It sounds like a really cool class. I'm just telling you. I had that when I was in college. So as she mentioned, I head up global programs and partnerships for our education vertical at Prezi. And then I also, on the business side of things, manage another of our global programs called our Prezi Expert Program, which is with businesses that are creating their own companies off of our platform, which is really cool. So it's a lot of fun. But just to sort of get us into the mindset for this conversation tonight, I wanted to start off with a quick exercise. So I'm going to pop up a sequence here just in a second to make sure all of your minds are flowing. And I want you to take, maybe like 15, 30 seconds to sort of see if you can guess what the next couple of letters are. And feel free to raise your hand if you have a thought. If you've seen this before, no cheating. So. Yeah.
N, T.
Yeah. Nicely done. Anybody else? See it? Still thinking about it? Yeah. Do you want to tell me what it means? What does this stand for?
It's just like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
Exactly. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So children typically are able to get this either immediately or within like 15 seconds or less. And so that's not to say to make you guys feel bad about yourselves if you didn't get it quite right away. But it's this idea that children have sort of this exuberance about them, and they don't think about all the complications, and we tend to complicate everything. Especially in entrepreneurship, you think about all the contingency plans, all the things that could go wrong. And so I want you guys to think tonight about, in entrepreneurship, not only the challenges and the things that can go wrong, but also what's possible. So I'm going to start off with a little bit of my story. I grew up in a really tiny town in Washington State called Ellensburg. This is a picture of it up here. It's really beautiful, but there's not a whole lot going on. And my parents used to pay me $1 a load to pick rocks in our field. And I realized pretty quickly that that was actually not that good of a deal for me. I think they were getting a really good deal out of it, but I was not. So I thought to myself, okay, how could I make my own money? Or how could I do something so I didn't have to rely on my parents and picking rocks? And so I looked around and thought, okay, what do I have that we could sell? And we had a small orchard and a garden. And so I ended up picking cherries and raspberries and blackberries. And I decided I was going to sell these at the end of our driveway. So like anybody that was passing by. So that's sort of where I got my bug for entrepreneurship. And my parents sort of thought I was a little crazy. At the end of our driveway, it was like a 1/4 mile long driveway. The road that we lived on, the speed limit was 50 miles per hour, but everybody sped because we're in the country, and so people aren't going to stop. So they're thinking like, wow, we're going to have a really disappointed daughter, that's going to come trudging back up the driveway in an hour or so. And luckily, I actually sold everything. It was really great. People were stopping. I had taken down my sign, and I was waving at all the cars and everything that was passing by, trying to get people to stop and buy this produce. And it worked. And so then later, that fall, we had pumpkins as well. So I decided that I should sell pumpkins. And was able to do that as well. So I guess it's sort of this idea of have a child's mind when it comes to entrepreneurship. Because my parents' first thought was about all the things that could go wrong. No one's going to stop. People drive too fast down there. People don't want to stop and buy blackberries or cherries from a little girl. And she's going to be disappointed, and it's not going to work. And in my mind, I was like, hey, I have this produce that I want to sell, and I'm going to go do it. And I didn't think about any of the complications or or hardships that might come up for me taking on this project. So that's just a little bit of my story. This is also me. I also love to build things. As you can see, my parents were working on our barn at this point in time, and I was taking photographs and was creating my own little, I don't even know what it is, but my own little construction. So how did I get from a little girl that was basically cannibalizing my family's garden to managing global programs at Prezi? And so that's kind of a little bit of what I want to talk to you guys about today. So one of my favorite business quotes is this quote that says, "Most organizations fail to create the future, not because they fail to predict it, but because they fail to imagine it." And I just want to let that sink in for a second, because you're all here because you want to be entrepreneurs, you want to have your own company someday, yes? And yes, seeing heads nod. You all want your own startup, potentially, or a large company. And most companies that are disruptive, whether it's a product or a company for that matter, they don't have an existing market. You have to create it. So that's something to think about in terms of imagining what the future could be. You can't predict it. So I just want to hear from a couple of you, why are you interested in entrepreneurship, or why are you here in this class? Yeah.
I am working right now in
Okay.
consulting, and I think it'd be a lot funner to not be working for someone above me
Sure.
and actually be directing a company myself and
So be your own boss.
implementing my own ideas, yeah.
Okay, cool. What else? Yeah.
I've had a lot of work experience, and there's always like a max, like there's no growth after a certain point.
You hit a level of
Yeah.
ceiling, essentially. Yeah. Okay, one more. Maybe someone from over here. The quiet section. Is this going to be my quiet section? Sorry, this is going to be a conversation tonight. Yeah.
I want to do something that I personally care, because it's really tough to find a company that fits all my satisfaction, I guess.
Yeah, so things you're passionate about, right? That's awesome. That's a perfect segue. There are enough first world convenience apps out there. So, and I don't say that to belittle all of the convenience apps that people are working on in the Valley, because there are a plethora of them, right? But do something you're passionate about, and do something that can maybe make the world a better place. That's something that I would challenge you guys to consider. It's sometimes, the easy route to say like, oh, I just want to, create a unicorn company and get $1 billion and quick exit, and I'm set for life. And if you are in this room or interested in entrepreneurship for those reasons, you should never create your own company, because that is the worst reason to go into entrepreneurship. It's hard, there's lots of failure, and there's very few people that have success. And I don't say that to make it a hardship, but it is the reality. So one of my favorite kind of diagrams around this that I love is around finding like your purpose or your passion. And the first one that I think is the most important, which you kind of touched on, is you love it. So do you love your idea? Do you love your project or the company that you are going to create? Are you great at it? If you're not great at it, you got to find a co-founder that can help you be great at it, right? You have to learn. You have to get to a place to where you are good at it before you can create it, right? The world needs it. So again, thinking about, does the world need something does it already exist? Or are you adding value to people's lives and not just convenience? And you're paid for it. So that's like the perfect circle, right? There's nothing wrong with wanting to have a salary and make money. That's totally fine. But that shouldn't be your sole motivator. This is like a nice grouping of things that I think all kind of culminate into what your purpose can be. So how does that sort of relate to Prezi and our role? At Prezi, how many of you have used Prezi before, actually? Oh, I love all the hands. This is great. All right, cool. So this is obviously the presentation software that I'm using tonight, if you're not familiar with it. And our main purpose, or our sort of value statement that we believe in, is that people have ideas that they want to share. And we believe our platform can help them do that in the best possible way. that they haven't had before. And one of our core values is that we want to make the world better. And so one of the examples that I want to share with you tonight is something I'm really proud of from my team. So I was reading an article in early January of 2014, and it was around this initiative called Connect Ed, which was the White House and the Department of Education's education initiative. And I saw that there were a number of really large tech companies that were part of it, and they had donated or committed to donating a large sums of money of either their software or hardware to underprivileged schools throughout the US. And I sort of thought, wow, this is very in line with what we are trying to do at Prezi. And in addition to that, why the hell aren't we a part of this yet? And so luckily I had a member on my team who had some past political connections, and he was able to get us in touch with the right people to chat with. And we were able to become part of the Connect Ed initiative. And we ended up donating $100 million worth of our software for Title I schools. So these are like the poorest of poor, underprivileged schools throughout the US that would never have the opportunity to purchase technology. And even though our target market are business users, especially like sales and marketing, you think of people who need to make pitches or presentations every day to make their livelihood. That's our target market, and that's where we get a lot of our revenue from. But being able to do something like this helped get us further along to reaching our core value and to reaching the 2 billion people that we believe have ideas worth sharing. And it's super cool when the president gives you a shout out on national media. That was pretty awesome and fun. But that's something we're really, really proud of. So how many of you guys enjoy and like love group projects? I'm seeing like 3 hands. I hated them in college. They're like the worst, right? Except for you guys. You guys like love, that's awesome. You guys are set already. Well, I hated them. I was very much an introvert. And you kind of have this feeling of like, God, they're gonna let me down. I'm always waiting for something. They can't do it as well as I could get it done. I can get it done faster. I can get it done better. They're not doing it my way. And that's frustrating, right? Well, I have to tell you that it doesn't change when you join a business or create a startup. You have to work with people. And there's another quick saying that I always love that, I don't remember who actually said it, but it's, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And I love that quote because, yeah, you can get somewhere really fast alone if you want to. But if you want to have the collective ideas of people, you need them to be on your team, right? So a couple weeks ago, I was in New York attending an event for the Clinton Foundation for work, and the past president gave a talk, and one of the things that really resonated with me was around this, leveraging the collective genius. So it was this idea that, the network effect is always going to be greater than a creative genius alone, was something that he said in his speech. And that really resonated with me because that's something that I've personally had to struggle with a lot, and especially in the startup world when you're taking on a lot of different things and you're trying to move incredibly quickly because you got a competitor coming up or a number of different reasons, and you really want to be able to move quickly. But getting a lot of heads in a room is always going to generate more ideas and better ideas than if you're just thinking about it on your own and by yourself. So you're sort of on this train of imagination. You're here now. You're sort of thinking about what sort of startup that you guys want to start or create, what kind of company, what kind of product, whether that's hardware, software, whatever it is that you guys are thinking about. But how do you sort of get to what's next? How do you lay those tracks to be successful? So how many of you know what this means? Yes? Someone tell me. Volunteers. Yeah. Yeah.
It's giving people jobs based on like who they know versus.
Who they know. Exactly. So giving people jobs based on who they know. So generally this is thought of as kind of like not a fair thing, or this is not so great. Well, I had an intern this summer who was family friends with our new head of product, and he had asked me if I would go ahead and interview her, and I was like, sure, I'll do a courtesy interview, sort of thinking like, yeah, I'll do the courtesy interview, but we'll see how this goes. I have some other candidates I'm considering. Well, she ended up being really awesome, and I actually ended up hiring her. She wasn't an amazing intern because she was friends or family friends with that person. She was an amazing intern for me because she had great work ethic, and she was constantly trying to learn more. And those are two things I really value in my interns. So one of the things that I would caution about this is it's always about who you know or who knows you. So Guy Kawasaki gave a really amazing talk at South by Southwest EDU earlier this year, and he was talking exactly about this. It doesn't matter how you got in the door, it matters what you do once you're in. So you're on a level playing field once you're in the door, right? So you want to immediately show that you can hustle and that you can add value to the company. Because some of you might not start out, some of you are working, and interning right now, and in the hopes to create something in the future. And most of us will have to go work for someone else before we can start our own thing, the majority of people, right? So that's definitely something to consider. Networking is not a bad thing. It's okay. So then you want to think about the future. So I have a few sort of building blocks, if you want to call them that, for success that I feel like have actually been really helpful for me to just sort of know and understand where I got today and how to get there. And hopefully it'll be helpful for you all. So the first one is if you don't ask, the answer will always be no. That's a very simple thing to say, but it's so true. So I have a fun example for this one that's not necessarily related to entrepreneurship, but it can be applied. So earlier this year, I had one of my team members was going through kind of a rough patch with some family stuff at home, and he had told me that the Game of Thrones premiere was going to be in San Francisco. So how many fans of Game of Thrones out there? A few, yeah, awesome. So we decided that we were going to get into this premiere. We were like, this is our goal, we're gonna make it happen. I wanted to get his mind off the family stuff and be able to do something fun. So we did indeed make it there. And I even got to meet George, which was really exciting for me because I love the books and I was a huge fan and really excited to meet him. How did I make that happen? That seems totally crazy, right? Well, we started emailing, we started tweeting at people, anybody that we thought could potentially connect us to someone at HBO. So I have a pro tip, it worked. Typically, people at companies, their email address is their first name, their last name, at whatevercompany.com. Now, it doesn't always work, but in this case, it did. And I had randomly found this guy who directed all of their social media for the particular TV show. And HBO is never going to hire me after I tell this story. But I reached out to him sort of thinking like, well, it might be his email address, it might not be, but I'm going to try it anyway. And I sent this whole pitch and, oh, we love Game of Thrones at Prezi and we want to do this, and all this stuff. And thinking I'm never going to get a response. Well, I got a response from him the morning of the premiere, and he said, sure, I can get you in. Do you need to bring anybody else? I was like, why, yes, I have someone that I do need to bring with me. Thank you so much. And that worked out so well. So, it was a day of happy accidents. I checked into the wrong tent, convinced them to give me a red carpet pass, so I could take pictures of all the actors, which got us into the after party. Like, it was a really great day. None of that would have happened if I wouldn't have asked or tried. It would have just been like, oh yeah, the Game of Thrones premiere is happening, that's super cool, too bad I can't go. So that can be applied especially in entrepreneurship and especially for you guys right now. You go to an amazing university, right? We can all agree. I'm a Husky, so not a huge fan of Go, but we'll talk about that later. So the thing with that is look at the alumni list that you guys have. Contact them. Ask them for a phone call. Find 3 alumni that you admire that have done something really amazing, either in entrepreneurship or they have a startup. Find their email. Most universities, you typically can get their contact information as a current student. And shoot them an email. and say, hey, I'm really impressed or amazed with the stuff that you've been doing. I'm also, going to school at Cal or Haas, and I was just wondering if you had, 10 minutes for a quick phone call. I'd love to ask you some questions. And you'll be surprised at how many people actually say yes. But if you don't ever do that, you could miss out on getting some making a really great connection, but also getting some really good advice. So I think those are things that, when you think about the statement up here, ask for a raise, ask for an opportunity. If you don't, it'll always be no. So sorry, I'm doing all these words tonight, but when I was in high school, I had a teacher who taught AP Calc, and he's probably one of my favorite teachers of all time. His name is Mr. Johnson, and he was amazing at teaching calculus, but he also really loved teaching other subjects, which he decided he would incorporate into his calculus classes, which the other teachers didn't really appreciate all so much, but he decided that he would include vocab for us. So it was always based off of books that he was reading at the time. He would just pick 3 random words every week, and we had to learn how to spell them, and we had to learn the definition of them. So this was a Mr. Johnson word, and I will always, always, always remember whenever I see one of these words, I'm like, oh, it's a Mr. Johnson word. And it actually was really helpful and wonderful. But how many of you know what this, or who can tell me what this word means? So it means a jack of all trades. So it's essentially a person that is doing a lot of different roles and jobs all at once. The biggest thing that you will see when you join a startup or when you start a startup, you've got to show them you can hustle. And by them, I don't just mean your boss or your intern or anything like that. I mean your co-founder, your first employee, your first 100 employees. You have to show them that you can take on roles that aren't in your job description. So your business card might say CEO or founder of XYZ company, but it also means you're the janitor, you're the coffee maker, you are the marketer, you're the product person. You take on so many different roles when you're creating your own company, and you have to be willing to do that. You have to kind of, I say, you have to get your hands dirty. You've got to really get in there, and you can't be sort of like, oh, I'm going to be the CEO, and I'm just going to pass out business cards and attend conferences. That's not going to actually work. So one of the things, and I've got a great example of this, one of the things when I very first started at Prezi, I was creating our first global program for university students, and it was needing to have a landing page, which is pretty simple, right? Well, our developers had 0 time to help me with that, because they're working on the product, right? So I had to figure out, I am not a coder, and I had to figure out, okay, how do I make this landing page? Like, I need a program landing page, I need some embeds and some content. It's pretty simple, but I did not know any coding other than like very limited HTML. So I had to figure it out. So I started compiling code from other pages and was able to sort of splice together and edit through HTML and CSS. And it wasn't pretty, but it worked. And I was able to show my boss and our co-founders that like, hey, all right, she didn't have the resources, but she was scrappy and she got something done anyway. And then of course they went back in and like fixed it all, which was great. So that's actually not part of the presentation, but that's another good tip for coding. If you create something and it's really bad, they'll totally fix it for you because they can't stand to see their work not purified. So that's something to think about as well. The other thing that's really interesting is you want to have an open network. So I just recently read an article by Michael Simmons on Medium. You should absolutely check it out. I can send you a link or send Mackenzie a link and have you send it out after if you're interested in reading it. It's pretty short, but it's really great. And it talks about how people that have open networks, it's been proven, are more successful in life. And of course, success is subjective, but money and the companies and things like that. So why do you think that is?
Is that because
connections help you get a lot of your jobs? Sure, okay.
You never know when you're gonna meet someone.
You never know when you're gonna need someone. What else? Or why else? Yeah,
It helps you bypass all the mistakes. By
how so?
learning- Just by learning, by what they did.
Okay, so learning from others
Yeah.
that have come before you, sure. Why else? There's one that's missing. So this was I totally stole this graph from an article, which I'm giving him credit for right now. But this is the graph that kind of shows why. So if you look at, and I'm just gonna walk over here, if you look at this, you're here and you sort of have all these people that are like-minded, right? So it's very natural to surround yourself with people that are like you. We gravitate as humans towards people like ourselves, whether that's politics, religion, anything like that. You naturally do that. When you do that, you end up in an echo chamber where all these people are saying the same thing that you're believing, and you're never challenged in your beliefs or your ideas or anything. People that have open networks, so this is you, well, all these people are all connected to other clusters, which then fall back onto you. So you're able to get a plethora of new ideas. You have people that are have opposite views of you, that are giving you a challenge and saying like, hey, actually I disagree with that, I don't believe that's right. You know, at Cal, you guys have that a lot, right? There's always a protest going on. But on the same vein, you are in an amazing environment right now where you have tons of diversity. So you have, I would say, take so much advantage of that. You're surrounded by people that think differently than you. And if you can harness that and start building connections that's open and have that open network, you're going to be much more successful. All right, so this might sound counterintuitive, but when you've got money, you don't innovate. So why do you think that is?
Like, you're not challenged to think outside the box because you have your
Exactly.
resources with you.
Exactly. You're not challenged. You have the money, and you think like, oh, well, I can just pay for it. It'll be done. So I have a personal example of that from Prezi early on. We were going to a conference. I was going to a conference on a presentation summit with our CEO, and we needed swag, and we were doing like a swag table for the first time. And it was really exciting, and we didn't really have a ton of money for swag. Now we have really awesome stickers, which you guys know. But I was trying to rack my brain, like, okay, so we don't have money for like t-shirts, like what are we going to give these people at this conference that's going to be memorable? So when you download a Prezi to edit, it downloads in a PEZ file or a .pez file, which is very unique to Prezi, and it's definitely memorable. So I decided, my clever hat on, that I would order several pounds of Pez candy, and I ordered some cheap little tin cans, and I slapped the Prezi logo sticker on top of them and put the Pez candy inside. And what it allowed me to do is when people were like, why are you giving away Pez candy? That's kind of an odd candy choice. Most people think chocolate or Skittles or, some things are sort of more common. And I was able to say like, oh, well, actually, when you download a Prezi, and I could talk about the product as we were talking to these people. So it was something that was like very memorable. I love Pez, that's a personal, subjective preference. But it forced me to be creative. And if we would have had a ton of money to do that, to buy swag, I wouldn't have ever made this. We would have gotten t-shirts and sunglasses, whatever sort of popular swag item at the time was. So it forces you to be innovative. So I would say be cautious about taking money immediately from VCs because then they own part of your company. And do you really need the money? And if you don't need the money, it's okay to do it bootstrapped. Another example of this is really my team. So in the education team, we sort of operate like a bootstrap startup within Prezi in a sense because the education vertical doesn't account for a lot of our revenue, so we don't pump in a lot of marketing money towards it, right? Because it does have a natural sort of viral loop, which is great. But our target is really business users, and so that's where we put the vast majority of our resources. So we have to be scrappy and come up with really innovative ways to market things. So I have one last thing that I kind of want to share with you, and then I will open it up for questions. I really enjoy it being much more of a conversation rather than me just talking at you for an hour, so I hope that's okay, if you're not too tired. But I want to end with this. So I want you to imagine that you have a bank account, and you have $86,400 in it. And every day, the balance goes to zero if you don't use it. So nothing carries over. So what do? What would you do if you knew that every day the bank account gets drained unless you, yeah.
You invest in stocks and bonds?
You invest in stocks and bonds, of course. You take it out, right? You take it out of the bank so that you can actually use it, because it goes away. So what is this sort of like? It's like time. So every day you have 86,400 seconds that you have to use or you lose it. And so what I would leave you with is that, and I bring it back to your statement earlier at the beginning, is that if you don't do things you're passionate about, and you don't make time for things that you're passionate about, it's never going to happen. You have to make those things a priority. And for me personally, it's so easy to, come home, I'm exhausted, and I'm just going to watch like 1 or 2 episodes on Netflix, and and then they have the autoplay feature, which just kind of keeps the you're like, all right, it's like the best thing and the worst thing, because 7 hours later you're like, oh my gosh, I just wasted half of my Sunday. How did that happen? And there's so many other things I could have gotten done. So I would say don't take the easy route. It's so easy to get down that path, and I have to remind myself to not do that as well. But make things that you're passionate about a priority in your life. So those are a few of my building blocks for success. Hopefully it was somewhat interesting and useful for you all. And I would say I'm really excited to see you guys create the future, and I would wish you the very best of luck with that. So I'm happy to answer any questions that you guys have. And again, have it be more of a conversation for the rest of the time that we have. And you're more than welcome to connect with me on LinkedIn, Twitter. I've got my business card and stuff if you have questions that you want to ask me later. Thank you. What questions? Are you all excited? Yeah.
My first question is, can a beginner create something like this?
Yes, is the easy question. No.
Okay.
I would say start with the template. Is a good way to start. This was actually a template that I built for myself, so then when I speak at a lot of universities and do a lot of public speaking, so I can take it and just sort of add in my new content that I like. But yeah, you can. A lot of this you have to get used to with the zooming canvas is the idea of like vector graphics and sort of telling a story or using a metaphor is really effective rather than bullet points. You want to tell a visual story.
Okay. And I have another
Yeah.
question, and that was, what's the biggest obstacle you've overcome, and
Biggest
and
obstacle.
biggest just failure?
I failed a football test in middle school, which was really, really upsetting to me.
Pretty tough.
That's not that big. The biggest obstacle, these are always really tough questions for me, because I think we have daily obstacles that we sort of have to overcome. I think one of the biggest things was my introversion. So I was a incredibly shy child, which you wouldn't know from selling the blackberries and cherries, right? But I hated public speaking. I mean, hated it. Like, it was just the most terrifying thing to me. I was an only child, so I hated group like any sort of interaction. It was like definitely hard for me to sort of push myself out of my comfort zone. And so that's a huge obstacle, and that was the way I did it, is I forced myself out of my comfort zone a lot, especially in college. And I took on leadership roles on campus and wanted to that included public speaking, and I would oftentimes like completely black out what I said. Like I would get off the stage and have like no idea what I said. I'm like, I hope that went well. And that was terrifying to me. So now that, I do it all the time, it's actually part of my role. I mean, if you would have told me that when I was, like 15 years old, I would have said, no way, that is never gonna happen. And now I actually enjoy doing it. So that's probably one of the biggest obstacles. And that I think you just can overcome by putting yourself out there and challenging yourself. I like a challenge, so I'm okay with that. Biggest failure. This sounds so cocky. I've been really lucky to have a lot of good things happen in my life. So I haven't had a ton of failure. I would say one project that didn't go well was this past year. I had this idea in my head. I want to host a Budapest trek for MBA students because our other office is in Budapest, Hungary. And I thought it'd be so cool because we host a lot of business students that come out to Silicon Valley in our office here in San Francisco and speak to them every year. And that's a pretty common thing. And I thought, how cool would it be to actually take them to Europe and have them see this whole new like tech ecosystem that's being created in the middle of Central Eastern Europe that most people are like, where's Hungary again? And so I had this whole idea, I planned it out, was waiting on approval, and it got to the point where it's like, wow, this is cutting it really close. We're not going to be able to have a lot of time to get applications. And I put a lot of energy and time into it, and in the end, we ended up having to pull it back. We didn't get enough applications, and I mean, that was the main reason. We were like, well, we didn't get enough interest. And I was like, I know this idea can work. And I was really disappointed. I was like so disappointed because it had been something I'd been wanting to do for over a year. And I put all this time and energy into it, and it essentially failed, which was terribly disappointing. And that happens. I think that's the thing when you try things, some things don't work.
Did you
Okay.
make it from it?
I learned a lot, yeah. I would say force your manager to make a decision, manage up, and in terms of getting approval on things, and start even earlier. I mean, I think you can never start too early. So that was a big one for me recently. What else? Yeah.
Do you have to use like your creative techniques to get to where you are today, like with your job?
Yeah, I forgot to tell you guys how I actually got to Prezi. So one of my students, I used to work for UW as well, and one of my students that I advised showed me Prezi really, really early on. We still had a super old interface and everything, but I thought it was the coolest software ever. And I was like, oh, my students are gonna love this. That would be so cool using this new software that they're using. And so I started using it for everything in my department. And I had at one point liked it on Facebook, and I saw that they were having a Facebook contest where you could submit a Prezi and win an iPad, I think was the prize. So I thought, like, why not? Like, I love making Prezis, I'm totally gonna do it. So I entered it like the day before the deadline, and a couple weeks later I get a call, or an email or call from their head of marketing at the time. And he said, hey, are you interested in a job?
Oh,
I was like, wow. Well, I wasn't really thinking about that, but actually, yes, that is my dream job. I would love to come down. So I flew down to San Francisco, and the way our hiring process works is kind of unique. We do an assessment week, and we don't do them as long anymore, but we used to have people come down for an entire week, and you work in the office, and you're given a project, and then you have to present your results or whatever the project that you worked on to the entire company at the end of your week. But it was amazing because you actually got a chance to work with your potential colleagues. So you got to know them, you got to see like, hey, am I a good cultural fit? They could see, can you actually deliver on what you say on your resume? And is it going to be a good fit? And so I did that, and they offered me the role, and I moved 2 weeks later. So it was a very kind of whirlwind sort of experience, but that's where, again, I would say, just thinking back on some of the stuff I talked about tonight, if you don't ask, the answer will always be no. If you don't enter a contest, you might not get a job offer. You never know where a job offer is going to come from. It was definitely not expected, but it was something I was really excited about, and it allowed me to still work in sort of like a leadership development capacity, which I was really, a lot of my background was in, and in tech, which I had definitely been looking to make a move into, so it was a perfect opportunity for me. What other questions do you guys have?
I was just wondering, were you thinking of applying there anyway, or you just really wanted to?
I had not thought about applying. You know, I was up in Seattle. I hadn't really considered leaving Seattle at that point. So I was happy with my job that I was doing. I kind of thought like, well, you know, I've been there almost 4 years. I'll start looking after this school year is over, and you know, and this was like in January. So I was thinking like I've got a good 5-6 months left in this role, and then I'll start looking. So it wasn't an expected thing at all. It was just a company that I admired. I'd say that's actually something really great to do as well, is make a list of companies that you admire, not just ones that are cool necessarily, but like things that you think are like, wow, I really love their values, I really love the way they manage, I really love, you know, their like vacation time things that they have, you know, like unlimited vacation, you know, whatever it is that you would potentially either want to include in your own startup or things that you would potentially want in an employer as well.
Any more questions? All right, well, thank you so much. If you want to talk to Ashley,